What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 112, and for today's episode, the topic is going to concentrate on the specific subgenre in dance music known as Rominimal. Rominimal is a term that is basically a play on words, mixing the term Romania or the country named Romania with minimal, and it basically describes minimal house that to me is sort of a takeoff from the earlier Latin influenced minimal of artists like Ricardo Villalobos and Luciano that I've done episodes on previously. Now obviously Romanian house is not exactly like that. It has some differing elements, but if you listen to the sound banks that are found in the more popular Romanian minimal releases, I think you'll find a lot of similarity in the percussion and the overall layout of the tracks. For example, your typical Ricardo Villalobos remix or record might be between 9 and 13 to 14 minutes, and coincidentally, Romanian house is also of the same duration. The genre itself, I think it's definitely got a lot going on right now as far as people releasing in it. If you search on Juno and you just type in the word Romania and sift through the results, there's enough music there that will turn up in that result to you could probably listen to it for a day straight and sample all through it and sift through it. So it's definitely a very popular genre. I think there are some masters in the genre that are creating some really nice tracks. They're hosting parties in really nice, exquisite outdoor and indoor venues in the Romanian scene, and it's probably inspiring a lot of people to try to do it their own way, try to come up with their own Romanian sound and see if they can emulate what they've heard and what they've experienced and what inspired them. I do think it's interesting that some of the Romanian records, like the ones that are over my shoulder there, that's the Jewel imprint label. They very often have a symmetrical artwork on them, and I'll show you one as I go through my review list today, where it's almost like a circular pinwheel pattern. I find that to be common on a lot of Romanian records, and it's almost like I can spot them without even really seeing the artist name. If I just look at the cover art and the track duration, there's a good chance that some of the records that I see as I'm looking through the new releases list in any website in the tech house or minimal genre, I'll be able to spot the Romanian artists just because of the way they do their artwork. So there's almost like this subculture and tradition around the sound that I find pretty intriguing. I have 5 records for you today that I want to go through because I was talking just a couple seconds ago about how much volume there is in this specific little niche subgenre. I wanted to create an episode for you guys where I highlight some of the best picks that I've found. It does take a lot of time to go through these records and find some of the shining stars, but I have succeeded in that. I personally didn't notice Romanian house probably until 2014 or 2015. I know that it goes back further than that, but I think when I first did notice it, to me it was just minimal music that happened to be releasing in Romania. I wasn't actually attributing the two, and now it's become so commonplace for Romanian artists to make minimal that the term Rominimal has actually kind of caught on and become kind of like a slang for it. So anyways, my first pick for you today is by an artist, Petre Inspirescu. If I'm saying his name correctly, I always butcher this stuff. He did an album on mule music. I consider mule music to be a staple in the electronic scene, and I have a mule episode if you search my channel where I talked about some of the mule singles that came out. This is a double pack by Peter on mule, and he has a couple of them. This one's called Vin Ploil or something like that. I'll just call it Vin for the sake of simplicity. And when I started this episode, I realized that I've been looking at this cover. I've been looking at this cover for probably the past 5 or 6 years, and I never noticed that there was a guy standing on here until just today. I always looked at it and I thought that there were clothes sort of hanging on a clothesline, and that was the aesthetic of it. And I never even saw that this guy was down here. I was like, oh, maybe that's Peter. Maybe it's not. Maybe he just had his friend stand in for him. I don't know. It's probably Peter. But this album is a really exotic ambient adventure. You can tell that it's made by a genius. I would say that Peter definitely meets the criteria for musical genius. It's odd, it's eccentric, and my favorite track on here that I think really stands out above the rest is Delir 2. Delir 2 is the B1 on this record. It's a it's a transparent vinyl that turned out really nice. It's pretty thick, so I would think that the thickness of it would lend into its sound quality. I think thicker records always sound a little bit better and cleaner than something that's thinner and maybe a little bit more prone to like a warp or having like a floppy nature to it. But when specifically when I listen to Delir 2, I get the vibe of being in a greenhouse, or if you've ever walked into a greenhouse that has a lot of plants in it, the first thing you'll notice is the humidity. And there's something about the plants do something to the air. I guess it's the exchange of carbon dioxide into oxygen, and that process, maybe it creates a slightly more oxygenated environment. But anytime I've ever walked into a greenhouse in the spring or summer when it was warm out, there's just something. It's like that as soon as that air hits you in the face, you could tell there's something a little bit special about it. Maybe it is just the oxygen content. I used to work in an office in like a classic cubicle setup, and I had a coworker that had his little cubicle that's probably half the size of this little small office that I'm in right now, and he had it just absolutely decked out with plants. You couldn't fit another plant on it. He had vines growing up the windows. Everything that you could possibly fit in terms of plants into this cube was in there. And as soon as you walked over to this desk, if you got within 5 feet of it, you could tell that there was a difference. The air was a little bit cooler, and like I was describing just a second ago, you could really feel like there was some special oxygenated presence there. And getting back to the record, I think that's really what Delir 2 creates. When I listen to that, it sounds like those plants felt to me, and that's really what makes it magic. There are two Romanian artists that are very popular, I would say in the top 10 of the Romanian scene as far as popularity goes. Cristi Cons and Vlad Kea. And they've run a label called Amphia. Amphia, I think, started releasing it before I caught on to the Romanian vibe and scene. I think they go back as far as 2010 or 2011. I don't have a lot of Amphia records, but I would be open to exploring further back in the catalog if you guys know or have any recommendations that have really kind of stood out in your collection and kind of stood the test of time over the last decade. This one here, I don't need to be sold on because I absolutely love it. Look at the cover art for this. This is Rhadoo's Colorado, like almost like the word Colorado alias, and I just absolutely love this cover art. It's kind of got this snowy, ethereal vibe to it. And the track that I love on here is the A1. It's called J Strawberry. It's a very interesting track in the structure of its beat. There's only a kick on the 1. The 2, 3, and the 4 are left blank, and after the kick hits, there's a bass line that sort of resonates off of it. On top of that, there is a Donata Dazzi, Luigi Tazzi, Hypnus, sort of twisted, gnarled up techno vibe that underlies that. People that would be fans of acid techno or the like I said, the Donata Dazzi vibe would really like Jay Strawberry. It's 13 minutes long. It doesn't do too much in terms of changing energy level. It's one of those hypnotic tracks that just seems to carry on and on. And when those types of tracks are presented in after hours environments or in clubs, it's the type of thing where you can really get lost in it. And if you're enjoying yourself with your friends and you're really having a good time, a track like that that only really lasts, 12, 13 minutes can seem like it's been playing for 20 or 25 minutes because you just sort of lose track of what you're doing and time itself. So it's like, I would say, like a time warp record, and it's very successful. I think everyone here is watching this episode is probably familiar with the label Ode, ODE. Ode is an interesting concept. There's probably 10 or 12 records in the series, maybe 10. And the records don't have an artist name on them. A lot of releases in the tech house and minimal scene don't have the artist name on them. I don't know if it's a marketing play. I don't know if it's honestly because the people making the music just want the music to be anonymous. But what ends up happening is that people end up speculating over who the artist is, and in the process of speculating and debating, oh, it's A, no, I think it's B, it generates a hype. And I don't know if that's intended or not, but that definitely happened with the Ode series. Now, the Ode series is attributed to the parent label Rora, which is run by Romar. So whenever there's an anonymous release, I would say it's like when somebody gets murdered in their own house, the first place that the police go to check is with the family that lived with the person that was murdered, right? So they know that it's most likely the killer was, in proximity to the victim. It's not always the case, but that's usually how it goes down probability wise. So whenever you're trying to attribute a release to a potential artist and you're not sure who it is, I think it's always most likely to start with the owner of the label and then work your way out. If it's not the owner, all right, who does he hang out with the most? Who has he paired up with for other productions, and start working your way out in concentric circles almost. So here, I think this is the Purple Ode series. And if you can see here, put that in front of the camera, that I didn't know what that was. I mean, it is a catalog number, but somebody pointed out somewhere online that that's actually a hexadecimal code for the color that's used on the label. So I guess that's the theme that they decided to go with here. I think that this is probably a Sepp record. I've listened to other Sepp tracks, and it sort of has the same pumping, pounding vibe that Sepp likes to create with some of his records. If it's not Sepp, my second guess would be Romar, because like I said, he's the one that runs the Aurora label. Therefore, he's probably in some way affiliated with the production and release of this. The track that I like on here is the B-side, and it's a remix of Bryan Ferry's I Put a Spell on You. I Put a Spell on You was Bryan Ferry's release that came out in 1993, and before this episode, just to pay homage to the source material, I went back and listened to Bryan Ferry's track, and I actually found it to be very interesting. I really like his vocal. I think he's got a great voice, and it's almost something that I would buy the vinyl of. Probably, if I could get it at a discount, I would buy the original just to listen to it. It came out in 1993. It sounds like it could have been late 80s, and it has a slightly kind of cheesy vibe to it, but you really can't deny that Bryan's voice is something, unique and deep and something special. And I think that's why Sepp thought that it was a good idea to use it for a remix, Sepp or Romar, whoever did the track here. It turned out great. It's got a really high-pounding energy, and this is something that you would play at the peak time in a tech house set. This is not something to open up with, but you would have the dance floor absolutely careening with this one. And moving on, another anonymous release on an anonymous label. This is the most recent release on the Telum series. Telum has 8 records out now, and you can see I took it out of its original sleeve. The sleeve that this comes in is very gritty brown paper, and I feel like if the record actually touches that brown paper as you're sliding it in and out, that's the type of material that's going to put a scratch on the record. So just be really careful with it. I'm always very gentle when I take this record out. I've been playing it a lot since I got it. This just came out in the last month, and it's not attributed to anybody officially. I was looking around on YouTube, and somebody confidently proclaimed that this is the artist Cosmjn, where the I is replaced with a J, and I don't really know how to pronounce that, so I'm going with Cosmjn. I was hesitant to buy it because I initially I latched onto the A1, but there's 3 other tracks on here that don't really do it for me. I saw that, like in the YouTube community, I saw other people really going bonkers over the B1, and I think the B1, I guess it's interesting, but to me it seems like one of those tracks that sounds good when you're out, but to me, when I listen to it at home, I can kind of take it or leave it. The A1 is where all the magic is to me. In that track, it reminds me of some of the uniqueness of Luciano's early records, where he used a lot of melodic concepts. There's at least 3 melodies going on in use here, maybe 4 if you consider the underlying melodic tones that are more of a drone. I like the simplicity and the complexity of the melodies sort of coming together. And anytime you have a tech house record, in my opinion, and you add at least a subtle melodic component, its usefulness and longevity goes up dramatically. To just have tracks that are DJ tools and dry tools, as they're often called, that's the kind of thing in the Romanian scene specifically where I listen to it and I'm like, I don't know how people are able to endure this for the full 10, 12, 13 minutes. But when you add a melodic piece to it, it's not just a dry beat, it's not just a loop, it then becomes like a song, and that's really why I like Telum 08. And my final pick for you today is an artist named Vern. Vern's real DJ name is Catalin Chiffon. He's a Romanian producer and DJ, and he released a record called Levant on Jewel Imprint. And Jewel is a great tech house label. If you want to explore that, I recommend it. They have a cool color concept where each record has its own color. That's always collectible to me, and I think there's a lot of talent on that label. The Levant EP is one of Jewel's most popular EPs. I think the Roger Garrison in the light aqua blue is also very popular. I used one of the Roger Garrison tracks in one of my mixes, and it's definitely something really smooth and very tidy to mix in and out of. I think it's just got like a slickness to it that can't be denied. Now here on Vern's EP, you get 4 what I would say are highly functional Romanian tech house tracks. The one that stands out the most is the Cosmjn remix on the B2 because that is the one that has the nicest melody. All right, that's all for my Rominimal episode, guys. Feel free to make recommendations down below. Shout out to Jordan Berry, who commented on my Baroque video and got me looking further and deeper into the Rominimal scene. I really appreciate the recommendations there, Jordan. And guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for parts 2 and 3 in the future. I have other tracks that I'm going to review for you from this subgenre. That's all for today, and take care.